and I was like, you know what, we need a complete change in genres right now. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you that are new here, my name is Rochelle. I collect and read a lot of different books, and I also have a disability. And today what we're gonna do is do a reading wrap up for the month of May. Now, for the month of May, I actually did a lot better than I have in past months for how many books I read, and that has to kind of do with the fact that I was participating in Escape the Readathon. I was on Team Hackers, and I had a blast. It was a lot of fun, so I was trying to go and read as many books as I could, and thankfully, a lot of the books that I read did go and fit a lot of the prompts that we had given, whether or not they were prompts at the beginning of the game or prompts that we got to specifically complete a room that we were in. So I was able to finagle and make a lot of them work, which was really nice. However, due to some stuff that happened at the end of the month, my reading kind of slowed down and I wasn't able to finish a few books. I did finish around 9 books. I would have probably finished 10-ish or more, but it didn't end up happening completely. But for the overall count of how many pages, just because I really love to go and break it down, it was 9 books, 3,238 pages, and then I read 22% of them in print, 33% were digital, so on my Kindle, and then 44% were audio. And my average rating was 4 stars, which is really, really awesome. I did have a really great reading month, but you're gonna be very surprised about some of the books that I read because they were just kind of all out on left field. They weren't the usual type of books that I would gravitate for, and that is because I was so frustrated by one of the books that I read previously, and I was like, you know what, we need a complete change in genres right now. So I'm gonna stop blabbing and let's go through the books. Starting from highest to lowest, we're gonna go with She Left by Stacie Gray. I rated this one 3 stars, and with this one, basically our main character, she's the only survivor from this house party that had a lot of her friends. She ended up going and walking away, and once she walked away, everyone that was at that party got killed off, and she's kind of had that in the back of her mind, wondering what has happened. Years have passed and she changes her name, and suddenly she's invited back to this place with a lot of people that kind of have connections to someone that passed away at that party. Slowly it happens where someone is getting killed off that is staying at this house, and everyone's kind of pointing fingers at each other and wondering like who the actual killer is, what's going on. This book did have a lot of moments that really captivated me and had my attention. I kept wondering what was going to happen and try to figure out the whole mystery. However, kind of towards the end of the book or even the middle, I just kind of started losing interest in the book. It didn't captivate me as much, and some things were just really frustrating or boring, and this book just ultimately didn't turn out as well as I had hoped. I still had a decent time with it, but it wasn't one of my favorites. Then moving on to a book that I got an ARC for, it was called Aftermath by M.K. Ahearn. And this one was kind of described as a Criminal Minds type of book. Basically, this was for all the people that love Criminal Minds and were obsessed with Spencer Reid and wanted to romance him, have some sort of relationship with that character. So this was more so, it was a crime mystery but also a romance at the same time, and I was very excited and curious about the whole concept of the story, but I figured out a lot of things a lot sooner than I would have liked. It was kind of easy to go and predict, and the only thing that really seemed very Spencer Reid for the male love interest was the fact that he had a great memory and could recall a lot of things that he read. Aside from that, there were really no qualities of the character that reminded me of Spencer Reid. It was a really good book and there was a lot of promise in it, but it kind of felt insta-lovey and very predictable. So I'm not quite sure if this would be a book that I would really recommend and say I absolutely loved. It was a fun little time, but yeah, that was kind of ultimately my feelings about that book. Then we also have Salvación by Sandra Proudman, and I also rated this one 3.5 stars as well. This was kind of described as a gender swap Zorro, and I grew up watching Zorro with my dad. We watched it as a TV show a lot of the time at the end of the day. The Zorro version that we watched was the one that had Guy Williams playing Don Alejandro. And then later, once the movie came out with Antonio Banderas, we watched that version as well. So Zorro has a very special place in my heart. So when I saw the description for this book, I was so excited for it. But there were a lot of things that were ultimately very frustrating about the book. And it wasn't until I read reviews for it that I realized what were some qualities that really bothered me. With this one, basically, the town that the main character is in is described of only having 3 females in it, including the main character who ends up becoming Salvación. And it was one of those things where it's like, you really have no idea that it's this person that's being our Cape Crusader. No one has any idea when there's barely any women in town. And then anyone that's familiar with Zorro, there's a lot of really awesome sword fighting scenes, this witty and humorous banter that Zorro will kind of do with some of the people that they're fighting with. And that really wasn't present at all in the story. There might have been a few moments, but it really wasn't there. And there were just some pieces of backstory that I wish we would have gotten, because in the beginning it's kind of described as the main character's mom is basically called to this area to mine this black salt, and because of all the perils that they faced on this journey, it basically led our main character to create the facade of Salvación. Some of the qualities that they hinted at, it really felt like we weren't getting the full story and we were missing out in a lot of details. And I think for this story, it would have been great if there was a prequel that could have covered a lot of that journey and filling in those missing details that us as the reader, we weren't able to get. So that's why I didn't enjoy the story as much as I would have liked. It just missed a lot of the things that I personally hold dear to my heart with the original Zorro, and I was really hoping to see them when I picked up this book. Then the next one we have is Whispers of Dead Girls by Marlee Bush. And this was one that I received as an ARC as well, Poison Pen Press. I've read a lot of books by them, and I was so excited when I actually received an ARC to go and cover. And this story basically covers our main character who has a sister that ended up going and dying. And we learn that it is due to a teacher, or it's kind of hinted at that a teacher that they had when they were growing up is involved in this murder. There were a lot of really interesting pieces with the story, and our main character kind of becoming a sleuth when she realizes that history's kind of repeating itself when she moves back to her hometown and kind of sees some similarities happening with a young, attractive teacher that works across the hall from her. And when she sees a young girl rushing out of that room crying, she starts kind of connecting dots and wondering, is this similar thing happening? And unlike before, can she actually go and stop it? There were a lot of really great qualities about this book and some interesting pieces that popped up in the end. However, I do want to say to check your triggers with this, because there is SA in it as well as inappropriate relationships between a teacher and a minor. So if that is something that bothers you, definitely go and check your trigger warnings before going and picking up this book, because they are pretty prominent throughout the entirety of the story as well. Then another arc that I had was The Only Survivors by Megan Miranda, and this one I actually really did enjoy. I rated it 4 stars. This talks about how a decade ago, 2 vans filled with high school seniors on a school service trip crashed into a Tennessee ravine, and only 9 survived. However, a year later, another person that survived from this trip ends up going and passing away, and then years later, another person from the group dies. The survivors basically go and meet up at this location every year to kind of reconnect and also collectively mourn what had happened. However, there's also this mystery piece going on, and it seems like someone actually knows what happened that night and that not everyone is telling the truth. Unlike She Left by Stacie Gray, this was actually a book that I enjoyed a little bit more. I really liked the writing, and right when I thought I had everything figured out towards the end of the book, there was another twist that got added, and it actually blew my mind. So I did really enjoy this, and I'm excited to read more books by Miranda as well. Moving on to the next book, we have Lights Out by Navessa Allen, and I rated this one 4 stars. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. This is completely out of the ballpark in something that I would ever pick up and read. And like I was hinting at the beginning of the video, I really needed like a huge palate cleanser. I was so annoyed by one of the books that I read in April, and I was just like, you know what? We need to just read something completely out of our comfort zone. Let's go and change it up. And boy, did I with this one. It was extremely spicy. It is not a book that I would say any younger people read, because it is very, very, very mature. There are plenty of triggers in this one, and if you listen to it as an audiobook like I did, it goes over a lot of those triggers and content warnings right away in the beginning of the book, which is great. One thing that I absolutely loved with this book is that there were 2 different narrators. I love, especially in spicier books or books that do have spicy scenes, when there are 2 different narrators for it. I really think it helps get the overall feeling of the story and get immersed without getting taken out when a voice doesn't really fit. And for those of you that aren't really aware of this book, I believe it's one that really took off on TikTok, and it's basically a stalker love story, and I'm going to leave it there because I don't really fully know how to explain the story, but I did really enjoy it, and surprisingly enough, I do want to read the next book, and I will probably be listening to that one as an audiobook as well, because I enjoyed my experience so much with the first book. Then we have The Enchanted Isles by Alycia E. Anderson. This book I actually started my month off with, and I was so glad I did because it really helped shape how well the reading month was. I rated this one 4.5 stars, and if you like parrots, if you like Pirates of the Caribbean, Atlantis and Milo as the main character, even Treasure Planet, any of those vibes that you get from those movies that you really enjoy, I would highly recommend you go and pick up this book. It was so great. And the main character kind of reminded me a little bit of Edie from The Mummy. She is a librarian, and she's trying to go and basically live up to her parents' expectations. She's always fallen short, and when her parents disappear, she realizes that she needs to take it upon herself to go and search for them. So she goes and speaks to the king, and basically he's like, you have to go on this ship and go and search for your parents, and if you're not able to go and do it under a certain amount of time, you will lose your home and basically be cast out onto the streets, because her parents basically were allowed the house that she lives in because of their job, and because they're no longer around, that security is suddenly swept out from under her. So she basically goes on this ship with this whole plan of finding her parents and also doing this research that the king has given her. But she finds out that her ex-fiance is also on the ship. Her best friend is forced to be on the ship as well. And then the captain, who seems a little bit of a grump, also seems to have some interests in her as well. So there's a bit of a why choose type of situation with all the different love interests, but also this great adventure and mystery, because when they get to these islands, they're suddenly discovering some things aren't exactly how they always thought it would be. History has kind of erased some key details and very much lied to them, and it was just such a refreshing read. I really enjoyed it so much, and it's definitely a book that I want to get a physical copy so I can put it on my bookshelves. And I believe the next book comes out in fall, so you better believe I am so excited to go and pick that one up, because I just want to continue on with the story. Then we have Only the Beautiful by Suzanne Meissner, and I listened to this one as an audiobook. It was kind of brought to my attention because of my book bestie, Once Upon a Bookish Steph, and I can't remember exactly what she had said when she read it, but I just remember that she said so many good things about it that I was like, all right, let's go and add it to our list. And I kind of went into this book not really knowing much about it, but I absolutely loved it. In some ways, this book had a lot of disability representation in it that was difficult to read about. Also just really beautiful at the same time. This book was heartbreaking and it just gave me so many different emotions. With the story, our main character basically ends up going and becoming pregnant, and the people that she is living with suddenly cast her out because they learn that she's with child, and it is very much frowned upon because she's not in a relationship, she's underage, she's a minority, and because of this she's kind of brought to different living situations that ultimately say she can't keep the child, and she can basically go through the pregnancy, but after she's pregnant, she has to give up her child to adoption. And I don't want to go too into details with it. I think it's almost better if you go into the story without knowing too much about it. I feel like that made me enjoy it even more because I had no idea the direction that the book was going to go in. And like I said, it was beautiful, it was heartbreaking, it made me feel so many different emotions. This is a historical fiction, so if that is something that you really enjoy reading, then I'd highly recommend going and picking up this book, but also being prepared to have a bunch of tissues next to you. Then our last book is For Whom the Bell Tolls by Jaysea Lynn, and this book is actually my very first 5-star read of the year. I was absolutely in love with this book. I got this one as an ARC from Saga Press, but I got it as an audiobook, so that was how I got to go and read this book the first time. And automatically, I think within a few chapters, I realized that this was a book that I absolutely loved, and no matter what, I wanted a physical copy. And so I did end up going and getting a physical copy when I went to the used bookstore. As you can see, this book is very chunky, but I do plan on going and doing a reread of this. There are so many moments that I want to relive and re-experience, and I'd probably end up going and annotating this book because there are moments that made me laugh, cry, and just kick my feet and giggle. This one was also very spicy, but I honestly didn't mind it. So with the story, our main character learns within the first few pages that she has cancer, and she decides to not undergo chemotherapy because of how far the cancer has progressed. And she knows she unfortunately is going to die and not live for very long. So she ends up going and passing away, is suddenly brought into the afterlife. However, the afterlife isn't exactly the way that we've been taught to believe it is, and so she very quickly kind of gets this lowdown on what heaven and hell are and what each part of them looks like, these different realms, these different worlds. There are so many different details about it that were so interesting and refreshing to go and think about. And if you like Has Been Hotel, which is one of my favorite animations, also not a show that's kid appropriate, but if you are someone that has watched Has Been Hotel and really enjoyed it, I think this book would definitely be right up your alley. There was a lot of really great jokes, witty banter, and a lot of really great moments that reminded me of Has Been Hotel. Our main character, she ends up going and creating this help desk because she realizes that a lot of the demons that are bringing some awful people into the different levels of hell need help, and she's had some customer service experience, so she takes it upon herself to go and create a customer service desk and try to go and contend with some of these not great people that have passed away and are demanding that they deserve something better than where they're being sent. There were so many great moments in this book, and I feel like even now just trying to explain it isn't doing it justice. So if any of the things that I mentioned seem like something that's right up your alley, I would definitely recommend picking this book up. Like I said, it's chunky, but you can go and listen to the audiobook, and it's really well done there as well. I'm probably not going to stop talking about this book because I really enjoyed it so much. But yeah, so those were the 9 books that I read for the month of May. I feel like I had a really great reading month. There were so many books that I really enjoyed, and I feel like so far, not just because I had a 5-star book for this month, but I feel like this was my best month overall with how I really loved most of the books that I read, and I had such a great time. I was in a little bit of a reading slump when I started off the month, and now at the end of the month, I feel like I'm not really in a reading slump, although I have been struggling to figure out which book I wanted to pick up next because so many of them were absolutely amazing. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to hear your thoughts on them down below, or if any of these books that I talked about were ones that now you're really interested in reading, I'd love to also hear your thoughts. And if you made it this far in the video, how about you leave a Belle comment for whom the bell tolls, just to let me know that you were here, or if you have absolutely no idea what you'd like to comment in this video. But I appreciate you all for being here, and as always, I want you to remember that you're worthy and capable of amazing things. Bye!